of messages, and I know that's a little bit out of the box, and I appreciate you walking with me a little ways to examine just how our culture from time to time has presented us with images that we can project upon, that as we project upon, we're expressing our inner confusion and chaos that we experience in the world and within ourselves. And we've done this, human beings have done this throughout time. All of our great literature and fiction is about what ifs. And that's one thing that I think is so important for all of us, to be able to ask what if. Some people of faith will try and narrow you down to not ask too many questions about what if. They want you to just accept the faith as they proclaim it and as they present it, and not question. But we here at Longwood Hills Church, we welcome questions. We want to ask what ifs. We want to be able to have the freedom to think, to imagine, because God has given us that ability. God does not ask us to check in our brains when we leave the parking lot and walk into the building. God says, bring your heart and your mind as well. And Jesus told us that we're to love God, not only with our heart, but also with our mind as well. So we welcome questions. I believe God welcomes questions. But as we examine in our series of messages through the month of October, which is kind of the month of Halloween and scary stuff, you see it all around in all the stores that you shop in, we're going to be looking at some images that are some contemporary and some are more traditional and time-honored, that we've put our inner confusion and questions and fear upon, so that we can look at it, we can examine it, we can evaluate it for our own living. And we're going to take a look at it because I believe deeply that the gospel brings us a faith and a message that enables us, like Psalm 46, to be still. And even though the nations rage and the kingdoms totter and the earth shakes and the heart of the sea, we don't have to be tossed to and fro. We can trust and we can live with faith and with courage. It doesn't mean we won't be unaffected. It means that we can live with purpose and strength and with a real message for others. And we'll get to that later in this series of messages. But today, we're going to talk about when the walking dead are after you. Now that seems a little unusual, I understand that, but you know, The Walking Dead has been a rather recent phenomenon, and I quite frankly, I don't get it. I tried to watch the series that's so popular on TV, The Walking Dead, and it's a little too gory and gruesome for my taste. So I'm not encouraging you to go home and on Netflix or anything else or AMC watch this program, because it's out of the box, I have to say. But I think that it does present to us a paradigm that we live in our world and that is very real. Zombies were kind of developed and as literature in theaters and movies in the 30s and in the 40s, but they really gained popularity more in the late 60s and 70s, and then more recently when Robert Kirkman did his comic series, The Walking Dead, that took him from poverty and having to have multiple jobs to support his family. Now he just does comics and writes stories, and he writes for this series on AMC. But the basic premise is, and I think if I can show you on the screen behind me, I'm not going to leave it up for very long, but I'm showing you a much sanitized version. You get it from this guy here that he's not too good looking. He's had some things happen to him. Mostly what's happened to him is that there's been an infection there's been a disease, and people have lost their lives, but somehow they come back to life, and they're walking around, and they're not too good looking, and their flesh is kind of melting off of them, and it's not somebody you want to sit across from at the dinner table and enjoy a meal. But their whole purpose is to look for people who are normal and alive under normal circumstances and to bite them, in some ways to devour them. But if they ever scratch somebody or if they bite them, what happens is they've infected that person who gets a terrible fever and ends up physically dying just to be brought back to life and to become one of them. Now, this is an incredible paradigm that I think is very powerful in our world. And you can go back to the other screen. I don't like that guy looking at my back, like he's going to sneak up on me or something. But I think this is one of the ways our popular culture brings us back to some real solid values and principles that come to us through the Bible and have God has spoken to throughout the ages to God's people. We live in a scary world. We live in a world that wants to devour us. You realize that? We live in a world where you can go off to work, where you're being responsible in going off to work and being a responsible employee or an employer, to go about your business, feed your family, provide for your community. And you can enter into a towering building just to find out that being responsible that day meant that was the same day that some radical idiot gets into a plane, commandeers it, and flies it right into your building, taking your life and everyone else's for an ideology that is just, or ideology that is just senseless, no purpose, not life-giving. You could be a person who enters that plane thinking, I'm just getting myself ready to fly from one destination to the other. You're thinking about getting there, the meeting that you have to have, or the people you're going to visit, and it all goes sideways because the world takes you and takes your life because somebody commandeers that plane who has a fundamentalist belief system that says we're right and everybody else is wrong, and we can do whatever we want to those people because they are wrong, and God says we're right, and God approves, or my God approves of this. You can do something with your family that's just ordinary, everyday, joyous, right? You can go to a mall shopping with your children or your grandchildren. You could be walking through thinking about what the next thing is that your grandchild wants that you're going to say no to. And then all of a sudden somebody comes and starts shooting the place up. You can go to a theater to watch a movie that's just come out, to be enjoyed and to be enhanced by perhaps, and someone walks in and starts taking lives. And you can send your child off to school, elementary school, thinking, what's the worst thing that can happen? The principal's going to call, and the world will take that life from you. That's the world we live in. That's the world that Robert Kirkman is talking about when he says the world can come and grab you at any time, or someone you love at any time, and just take life away. But there's even a deeper meaning to this as well, and a deeper example, and that is that somehow in this world that wants to bite us and infect us, will do so in a way that will alter what we think are our principles and our ideals and our values, and somehow shift us into a different narrative where we think that our identity, our value, our worth, all come from the things that we do in life, or the things that we acquire in life, or the things that we possess in life. That somehow these are the most important things. How much money do I make? Where do I live? Am I truly prestigious to those around me? Am I a winner? I've heard it said that the golden rule is that those who have the gold rule. And we're given this image that somehow to have a successful and full and meaningful life means that you and I must get on that fast track. We got to get in that rat race. We got to go out and make it and make our impression upon the world. So when we die and when what we leave behind is all this stuff that we have. And you see, that world never comes to us, does it? It never comes to us in an obvious way, ugly, flesh dropping off of it, just trying to suck life out of you. It never comes that way. It comes with a lot of glitter. And it comes very packaged beautifully and attractive. That this is what do you remember, this is going to date me certainly, but back in the 80s there was this thing called yuppies. Young, upward mobile, urban, professional. I don't know if I got that right, but I'm sure you'll let me know. But it was all about, well, what is it? We go back into the city, we get out of the suburbs, we have these wonderful paying jobs, and they were great paying jobs, and they had so much money they didn't know what to do with it, and so they bought a BMW, and they got a watch, a Rolex, because that pretty much said that you've made it, and they dress a certain way, and they live, and they go to all the right things, right? And then after about 5 or 7 years of that, the yuppies started coming out with a different narrative. We got all this stuff. We acquired all of the symbols of success in our lives, and I'm still empty. The world has made me like it. It has bitten me with this infection. And I find myself just walking around. Isn't that a scary world to live in? That we would be bitten in a way that we think this is what life is all about. Getting, acquiring, possessing. So that at the end of our lives, we find out it's been a ruse. When we get to the end of our lives, we find out that the real purpose of our being here together was about relationships and getting connected, not getting things, but giving things. We find ourselves living out T.S. Eliot's Hollow Men. We are the hollow men. We are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless, as wind in dry grass or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. He ends it in this way. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. What a ruse to get to the end of our lives and discover that the world has bitten us with an infection, and we spent our precious time and resources and energy on getting, acquiring, and possessing because the world said that's what it means to be a success and to live joyfully and fully. To suddenly be in a bed, not surrounded by your loved ones because you haven't put any time into it. Not surrounded by your friends or grieving friends in their hearts because you haven't given your time for it. But alone. To this, the gospel says, Jesus, the night before he died, said, "Let not your hearts be troubled by that, neither let them be afraid. In my Father's house are many dwelling places." And if it weren't so, and here's the kicker, folks. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. And I'm not going to come and take your life from you. Because Jesus in John also said, "I have come into the world to give the world life, and to give it life abundantly." And just prior to this 14th chapter where he says, and he calms our hearts, he says to his disciples, this is the way then. This is the way to a life. And he when it's at table with his disciples, he took a bowl and he took a towel and he went around the table and he began to wash their feet. And he said, now I've done this for you. I command you to go and do this for each other. And not only that, he said, you are to go and love each other as I have loved you. In the same chapter in John, he says, my peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you. Not as the world gives do I give to you, because what the world wants is to take from you. But I want to give to you. For earlier in John, we hear that most famous line of Scripture that we often see advertised at football stadiums. It's not a person's, it's not their row and it's not their seat. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave. That's the God we worship. Not a God who takes from us, but a God who gives to us. And that's the narrative that Jesus came. And Jesus said, you know what? Your value, your worth, your self-esteem is all built on not what you do, what you make, or what you possess. It is all built because you're my child. Created in God's image, created in God's likeness. You are my child. We draw life from that. Not a zombie world that takes away, but a world of life. And not only just life, but abundant life.